I was standing in my mama's kitchen when the letter slid out of the envelope and split my world clean in half. Notice of eviction. Bold letters, no mercy. My hands started shaking so bad I had to sit down at the table where my mother used to drink her morning coffee. I remember whispering, "This gotta be a mistake," like saying it soft would make it true. But my name wasn't on the deed. My sister's was. The air in that house felt heavier than grief ever had. Mama had only been gone 3 months, and already it felt like she'd been erased. I called my sister Patrice immediately, my heart banging against my ribs so loud I could hear it in my ears. She didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. By the third call, my fear had turned into something sharper, something uglier. Betrayal has a sound. It's the click of a call being ignored when your whole life is on the line. That house was supposed to be our anchor. Mama promised me, promised both of us, that no matter what happened, her girls would always have a roof. I moved back in to take care of her during her last year, juggling my job and my kids, wiping her forehead when chemo took her strength. Patrice came by when it was convenient. Holidays, Sundays, long enough to be seen, never long enough to help. Still, I never thought she'd do this. When she finally called back, her voice was calm, too calm. "Monique, you need to accept reality," she said, like she was talking about the weather. "Mama signed the house over to me, legally." I felt something drop in my chest. "That's a lie," I said. "Mama couldn't even hold a pen by the end." Patrice sighed like I was the problem. "I'm not doing this with you. You got 30 days. I hung up and screamed into my hands so my kids wouldn't hear me. My daughter Aaliyah was doing homework in the living room. My son Marcus was building something out of old Legos on the floor. They didn't know their world was about to collapse. They still believed in family. I didn't have the heart to take that from them yet. That night, after they went to sleep, I pulled out every document I could find. Old tax records, Mama's will, hospital papers. The more I looked, the clearer it became. Something was wrong. Signatures didn't match. Dates didn't line up. Patrice had always been good with paperwork. That's what Mama used to say. I used to believe it meant responsible. Now I knew it meant dangerous. I drove to the county office the next day on my lunch break, heart pounding, palms sweating. The clerk slid the deed across the counter, Patrice's name, recorded 6 weeks before Mama died. I stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. "This can't be right," I whispered. The clerk shrugged. "It's filed." I walked out into the parking lot and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought about every night I slept on that pull-out couch beside Mama's bed, every bill I paid, every meal I cooked. Patrice had been planning this while I was holding Mama's hand. 30 days passed faster than I thought possible. I packed our clothes into trash bags because boxes cost money I didn't have. I told the kids we were going on an adventure. I smiled hard, my face hurt. The night we left, I locked the door one last time and pressed my forehead against it, breathing in the smell of lemon cleaner and memories. We slept in my car that first night. I parked behind the grocery store where the lights stayed on. I cracked the windows so the kids wouldn't suffocate and told them it was like camping. When they finally fell asleep, I cried so quietly my chest burned. I promised myself this was temporary. I promised Mama I wouldn't let Patrice win. What I didn't know then was just how deep my sister's lies went, or how far I was about to fall before I learned how to fight back. The second night in the car was worse than the first because the shock had worn off and reality had teeth. My back ached from the seatbelt buckle pressing into my spine, and my legs were stiff from curling around my kids like a human shield. The grocery store lights hummed overhead, buzzing like they were laughing at me. Every time a car pulled in, my heart jumped. I was terrified someone would see us and ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. By morning, I wiped my face with baby wipes, braided Aaliyah's hair in the front seat, and told Marcus to keep his voice down like we were playing a game. I dropped them off at school, smiling so hard my jaw hurt. The moment they disappeared through those doors, my body gave out. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and sobbed until my chest felt hollow. I went straight to work after, a double shift I couldn't afford to lose. I stacked shelves, smiled at customers, and answered, "How you doing?" with, "I'm blessed," because that's what Black women do. We bleed quietly. Nobody knew I didn't have a bed to go home to. Nobody knew my sister had stolen my life with a pen and a lie. On my break, I called Patrice again. This time she answered. "I'm homeless," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. "Your nieces and nephew are sleeping in a car." There was a pause, just long enough for hope to flicker. Then she said, "That's not my problem, Monique. You should have prepared better." Something inside me snapped clean in two. "You forged Mama's signature," I said. She laughed, actually laughed, and hung up. That laugh stayed with me all night, echoing louder than the traffic outside the Walmart parking lot where we slept next. I watched my kids' chests rise and fall and felt rage coil in my stomach. Patrice hadn't just taken a house, she'd taken safety, she'd taken dignity, and she'd done it knowing I'd sacrifice everything for my children. The next morning, I went to the public library instead of work. I couldn't keep pretending this would fix itself. I needed answers. I needed weapons. I sat at a computer and typed words I never thought I'd need. Forged deed, wrongful eviction, property fraud. Page after page pulled up stories that sounded too much like mine. Sisters, brothers, cousins, family stealing from family and calling it business. I learned that signatures could be challenged, that timing mattered, that hospital records could prove incapacity. Every sentence I read felt like oxygen filling my lungs for the first time in weeks. I printed everything I could afford, stuffing papers into my purse like they were lifelines. That night, I told the kids the truth. Not all of it, but enough. "Mommy's working on getting us back home," I said softly. Aaliyah nodded like she understood more than I wanted her to. Marcus asked, "Auntie did this?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, baby." His face hardened in a way no child's ever should. "That's not fair," he said. No, it wasn't. Days blurred together. I worked nights cleaning offices, days at the store, slept when I could. I showered at a friend's house without telling her why. Pride is heavy, but homelessness is heavier. Every dollar went into gas and food. There was nothing left to save. One afternoon, I got a call from legal aid. "We reviewed your intake," the woman said. "There may be something here." My knees went weak. "But," she added, "your sister's documents are extensive. This won't be easy." I looked at my kids eating fries in the back seat, grease on their fingers, laughter soft but real. Easy was never part of my story. I straightened my shoulders. "I'm ready," I said. What I didn't know was that facing Patrice in a courtroom would cost me more than money. It would force every buried family secret into the light, starting with one truth I was never supposed to uncover. The first time I saw Patrice after filing the paperwork, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might throw up right there in the courthouse hallway. She looked untouched by struggle. Pressed blazer, neat locks pulled back, lips glossy like life had been kind to her. I hated myself for noticing. I hated that some small part of me still searched her face for the sister I grew up with, the one who used to braid my hair on the porch when Mama worked late. She didn't hug me, didn't even say my name. She looked past me like I was invisible, like I was already erased. "You're really doing this?" she asked, folding her arms. Her voice carried that same calm I'd heard on the phone, the kind that comes from thinking you've already won. "Dragging Mama's name through court?" "You dragged Mama," I said quietly. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "I'm just telling the truth." Her eyes flickered for half a second. That was the first crack. Then she smiled. "You don't know what you're talking about." Legal aid assigned me a young attorney named Miss Carter, black woman, sharp eyes, no nonsense. She listened without interrupting while I laid everything out: Mama's illness, the timing, the signatures. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "We're going to need hospital records and family history, everything." I nodded, even though the words family history felt like a warning. Digging through Mama's old files was like reopening wounds that never healed. I did it late at night in the car while the kids slept, the glow from my phone lighting up names and dates I'd tried to forget. That's when I found it, a bank statement tucked inside an envelope labeled taxes, large withdrawals, years old, Patrice's name all over them. My chest tightened. Mama had always complained about being short this month, even before she got sick. I used to slip her grocery money when I could, thinking it was just retirement stretching thin. Now I saw the pattern. Patrice had been bleeding her dry long before the house. I confronted her by text, hands trembling. "Did you take money from Mama's account?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "You don't want to open that door," she said coldly. "Some things are better left alone." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the house. This was about control, about Patrice always needing to be the one on top, even if it meant standing on Mama's back, even if it meant crushing me and my kids in the process. The stress started showing on my body. I lost weight without trying. My hair thinned at the edges. I woke up every night at 3:17 a.m., heart racing, mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. What if we lost? What if Patrice retaliated? What if the kids had to change schools? I held it together during the day and fell apart in silence at night. Court day came faster than I was ready. I wore my only decent dress, one Mama had bought me years ago for church. I sat at the plaintiff's table, palms sweating, listening as Patrice's lawyer painted me as irresponsible. "She failed to plan," he said. "My client stepped in." I'd bitten my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Then Miss Carter stood up. She presented the hospital records, Mama's condition, her inability to sign documents at that time, the forged signature enlarged on a screen compared to older, legitimate ones. I watched the judge's eyebrows knit together. Hope flared, dangerous and bright. But then Patrice took the stand. She cried. She talked about sacrifice and family burden. She said Mama wanted her to have the house because I was unstable. Each word felt like a slap. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stared straight ahead and breathed, just like Mama taught me. When court adjourned for the day, Patrice leaned close as we passed. "You're digging your own grave," she whispered. I watched her walk away, heels clicking, and realized something terrifying. If the judge believed her, I wouldn't just lose the house. I'd lose my children's trust, my mother's legacy, and the last piece of myself holding on. And tomorrow, the judge would decide whose story mattered more. I didn't sleep at all the night before the judge's decision. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to shut down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patrice on that witness stand, tears falling on cue, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. I replayed her words over and over. Unstable, burden. Mama wanted me to have it. Lies wrapped in the language of concern, the kind of lies people love because they sound responsible. We were still sleeping in the car then, parked behind a closed church that didn't ask questions. I stared at the stained glass window, glowing faint under the streetlight, and whispered a prayer I didn't even know how to finish. I wasn't asking for comfort. I was asking for justice. There's a difference. The kids woke up groggy and quiet. They could feel it, even if they didn't understand it. Stress has a smell. It hangs in the air and seeps into children's bones. I dropped them at school, kissed their foreheads longer than usual, and told them Mommy had a big meeting. Aaliyah squeezed my hand and said, "You got this." That almost broke me more than Patrice ever could. At the courthouse, Miss Carter pulled me aside. "Be prepared," she said gently. "Judges don't just look at documents. They look at patterns, credibility, history." I nodded, even though my stomach was in knots. What history would they see? A woman with 2 jobs and no address? Or a daughter who showed up when it mattered? When the judge entered, the room went still. My heart hammered so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. He adjusted his glasses and began summarizing the case. His voice was steady, neutral, impossible to read. Every sentence felt like it took a year to finish. He talked about the deed, the timing, the discrepancies. He talked about the bank withdrawals, how they raised serious concerns. Patrice shifted in her seat. For the first time, she looked nervous. Her lawyer scribbled notes furiously. Then the judge said words I wasn't prepared for. However, intent is difficult to prove. My chest tightened. The room felt smaller. Family matters often involve complexities that the law alone cannot untangle. My hands started to shake again. I clenched them together under the table, nails digging into my skin. The judge announced he would need additional testimony, more documentation. The decision would be delayed. Delayed. I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. No victory, no defeat, just more waiting, more sleeping in cars, more pretending everything was fine. Patrice let out a slow breath, relief flickering across her face before she caught herself. As we stood to leave, she looked at me with a smirk I knew too well. "Told you," she whispered. Outside, I finally broke. I cried right there on the courthouse steps, shoulders shaking, dignity unraveling in public. Miss Carter stood beside me, silent, letting me feel it. When I caught my breath, she said, "This isn't over. In fact, this tells me we're close." Close didn't feel like enough. Close didn't buy beds. Close didn't stop my kids from asking when we were going home. That night, the car felt smaller than ever. Marcus asked if we were in trouble. I told him no, but my voice cracked. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. I got a call from an old neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. She'd lived next door to Mama for 30 years. "Baby," she said, "I heard what's going on." My heart skipped. "I saw Patrice bringing papers over when your mama was already sick. She asked me to witness something. I refused." I pulled over so fast my tires screeched. "You're sure?" I asked. "I know what I saw," she said, "and I'm willing to testify." Hope rushed through me so hard it almost hurt. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. This was a living witness, a voice outside of mine saying Mama wasn't alone, and neither was I. But hope is dangerous when you're already tired, because just hours later, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. No name, just 3 words written in sharp black ink. "Walk away now." My hands trembled as I folded the paper. Patrice was escalating, and for the first time, I wondered how far she was willing to go to keep what she stole. That note stayed in my pocket all day, folded and unfolded so many times the paper softened at the creases. "Walk away now." 3 words. No signature, no explanation, just a threat disguised as advice.
I knew Patrice's handwriting the way you know a scar on your own body. Even without her name on it, I felt her in it. Her confidence, her assumption that fear would finish what lies had started. I didn't tell the kids. I didn't tell Miss Carter either, not right away. Part of surviving as a Black woman is knowing when to speak and when to gather strength quietly. But that night, parked behind the church again, I stared at the ceiling of the car and realized something had shifted. Patrice wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was trying to silence me. The next morning, I met Mrs. Henderson at her kitchen table. The house smelled like coffee and lemon polish, just like Mama's used to. Mrs. Henderson's hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around her mug. "Your sister came over with papers," she said your mama asked her to, but your mama was barely conscious. I told Patrice it wasn't right. She looked me straight in the eyes. That woman was desperate. I recorded her statement with Miss Carter's permission later that day. Every word felt like another brick laid under my feet. Proof, pattern, witness. Patrice's calm facade was starting to crack, and she knew it. But stress has a way of collecting interest. My car broke down the same week. Transmission, $800 I didn't have. I sat in the mechanic's office nodding like I understood options I couldn't afford. No car meant no work. No work meant no case. I stepped outside and cried until my throat hurt. A friend from church let us crash on her couch for a few nights. I was grateful, but every morning I woke up before everyone else, folding blankets and wiping counters like my worth depended on being invisible. Pride and gratitude wrestling inside my chest. My kids tiptoed, afraid to take up space. That hurt more than sleeping in the car ever did. Patrice started calling then, leaving voicemails. Her tone had changed. "We don't have to do this," she said. "Think about the kids." That was her favorite weapon, pretending concern while twisting the knife. I saved every message, let her talk, let her show who she was. Court resumed 2 weeks later. Mrs. Henderson testified. Her voice was steady, clear. She described Mama's condition, Patrice's urgency. The judge listened closely, nodding. Patrice wouldn't look at me. Her lawyer objected, but the damage was done. A neighbor with no stake in the house had no reason to lie. Then Miss Carter introduced the bank records, not just withdrawals, but transfers. Thousands of dollars moved into Patrice's personal account over 5 years. "This demonstrates a pattern of financial exploitation," she said. I watched Patrice's shoulders stiffen. This was bigger than the house now. This was criminal. During recess, Patrice cornered me in the bathroom. "You think you're winning?" she hissed. Her mask was gone. Her eyes were wild. Mama always needed saving. She knew that. I took a deep breath. "Mama knew who loved her," I said, "and it wasn't you." She slapped the wall beside my head and stormed out. I stood there shaking, reminding myself to breathe. Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's just staying upright. The judge called us back in. He announced that due to new evidence, the court would consider nullifying the deed pending final review. My heart pounded so hard it made me dizzy. Nullifying meant the house could come back into Mama's estate, back into fairness. But before he could finish, Patrice's lawyer stood. "Your Honor," he said, "my client wishes to make a statement." Patrice stood up slowly, smoothing her blazer, eyes scanning the room like she was choosing her next move. I felt it in my bones. Whatever she was about to say would change everything. And I had no idea whether it would save me or destroy what little family I had left. When Patrice stood up, the room felt like it tilted. Chairs creaked. Someone in the back coughed. I held my breath because I knew my sister. She never spoke unless she thought she could control the ending. Her eyes landed on me for just a second, sharp and calculating, like she was measuring how much damage one more lie could do. "Your Honor," she began, voice trembling just enough to sound human, "I never wanted this to happen." I almost laughed. almost. She talked about responsibility, about being the older sister, about how Mama leaned on her financially. She said she paid bills I knew damn well she didn't. She said Mama was afraid I'd lose the house because I was overwhelmed. Each sentence rewrote our history in real time. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a document I had never seen before. "This," she said, holding it up, "is a personal letter from my mother." My heart slammed against my ribs. Miss Carter stiffened beside me. Patrice continued. "She wrote this shortly before she passed, explaining her wishes." The bailiff took the paper and handed it to the judge. The room went silent while he read. I stared at Patrice, my hands numb, my ears winning. A letter, handwritten. My mind raced. Mama could barely speak near the end. She definitely couldn't write paragraphs. But fear doesn't listen to logic. Fear whispers, "What if?" The judge cleared his throat. "This letter raises additional questions," he said slowly. "However, authenticity will need to be verified." Relief hit me so hard my eyes burned. Patrice's jaw tightened. She hadn't expected that. Court adjourned again. Outside, Miss Carter didn't sugarcoat it. "If that letter is fake, it helps us," she said. "If it's real, it complicates things." I nodded, exhaustion pulling at my bones. I felt like I was fighting ghosts, documents appearing out of nowhere, stories shifting whenever truth got too close. That night, while the kids slept on our friend's living room floor, I stared at Mama's old Bible in my lap. I flipped through it absent-mindedly, fingers brushing pages she'd underlined years ago. That's when I saw it, an envelope tucked into the back cover, yellowed with age, my name written across the front in Mama's looping script. Inside was a letter. Not long, just a page, dated 2 years before she got sick. Mama wrote about loving both her daughters but being worried about Patrice's habits. She wrote, "If anything ever happens to me, I want the house handled fairly. I do not want Monique or the children put out." My vision blurred. This wasn't new. This wasn't reactionary. This was Mama thinking ahead. At the bottom was her signature, strong, unmistakable. I brought it to Miss Carter the next morning. She read it twice, then looked up at me with something close to awe. "This," she said, "changes everything." But Patrice wasn't done. 2 days later, Child Protective Services showed up at my job. Someone had reported that my children were homeless and unsafe. Technically, it wasn't a lie, but it was weaponized. I answered questions calmly, showed them school records, explained the legal situation. The caseworker's eyes softened. "This looks like retaliation," she said quietly. Still, the fear lingered. Patrice had crossed a line I didn't know could be crossed. She wasn't just trying to take my house anymore, she was trying to take my children. The next court date loomed like a storm cloud. Authenticity experts, handwriting analysis, bank investigators. This was no longer just a civil dispute, it was unraveling into something darker. Patrice avoided my gaze every time we crossed paths. Her confidence was cracking, replaced by something frantic. The night before the final hearing, I sat alone in the car again, parked under the same flickering light where this all began. I thought about Mama, about promises, about how survival sometimes demands you stop being polite and start being honest, no matter who gets exposed. Because tomorrow, the truth was going to speak louder than either of us ever had, and only one of us would walk out with everything to lose. The final hearing morning felt unreal, like my body was moving, but my spirit was hovering somewhere above it all, watching. I wore Mama's pearl earrings, not for luck, but for grounding. I needed to remember who I was before betrayal tried to shrink me, before survival became my full-time job. The courtroom was fuller than before. 2 handwriting experts, a bank investigator, even a CPS representative sat quietly in the back. Patrice arrived late, eyes shadowed, makeup heavier than usual. She didn't look at me, not once. That told me everything I needed to know. The judge called the case, and this time there was no easing into it. Evidence came fast, clean, ruthless. The first handwriting analyst testified that the letter Patrice submitted showed significant inconsistencies with Mama's known writing. Pressure differences, stroke hesitation, someone imitating, not writing from muscle memory. The second expert confirmed it. Patrice's lawyer objected, weakly, too late. Then Miss Carter presented Mama's letter, the one I found in the Bible. The room shifted. The analyst compared signatures side by side on a screen. Mama's real handwriting stood firm and confident, like it always had. The judge leaned forward. Next came the bank investigator. He detailed years of transfers, structured just below reporting thresholds, intentional, calculated. This indicates long-term financial exploitation, he said plainly. I felt my chest tighten, grief mixing with vindication. Mama had been robbed quietly, and now the silence was ending. Patrice finally took the stand again. This time there were no tears, just anger. "She's lying," she snapped, pointing at me. "She's always played the victim." The judge raised a hand. "Enough," he said sharply. "Miss Williams, you are doing yourself no favors." Then CPS spoke. The caseworker confirmed the report came from a private number traced to Patrice's office building. Retaliation. Documented. The room went dead quiet. The judge removed his glasses. That sound, soft plastic against wood, felt louder than any gavel. "This court finds that the deed transfer was fraudulent," he said. My breath caught. "The house is hereby returned to the estate. Furthermore, this court is referring the matter to the district attorney for potential criminal charges." I covered my mouth as tears spilled down my face. Not loud, not dramatic, just relief pouring out of a body that had been holding too much for too long. Patrice didn't move. She stared straight ahead like the verdict hadn't reached her yet. As deputies approached, her shoulders finally sagged. She looked small, human, broken by her own choices. Outside, the winter air felt sharp and clean. Miss Carter hugged me. "You did this," she said. I shook my head. "Mama did," I replied. That evening, I took my kids to the house, our house. The lock had been changed, but the door still recognized us. When I turned the key, something inside me unlocked too. The kids ran room to room, laughing, touching walls like they were real again. But standing in Mama's bedroom, I noticed something was missing. Her jewelry box. Gone. Drawers disturbed. Patrice hadn't just stolen before. She'd taken one last thing. And that told me this story wasn't finished yet. The victory should have tasted sweeter than it did, but standing in Mama's bedroom, staring at the empty space where her jewelry box used to sit, my stomach sank all over again. The room smelled the same, lavender oil and old books, but something sacred had been disturbed. Victory doesn't erase violation, it just gives you the strength to name it. Aaliyah noticed first. "Mommy," she said softly, "wear Grandma's ring." My chest tightened. That ring was Mama's pride, a thin gold band with a tiny diamond worn smooth from decades of work and worship. I swallowed hard. "We'll find it," I said, even though I didn't know how yet. I documented everything, took pictures of the drawers, the missing items, added it to the growing file that now followed me everywhere like a shadow. Patrice had lost the house, but she'd tried to leave with pieces of Mama, pieces of power. I wasn't going to let that slide. We didn't move back in right away. The house needed utilities turned back on, repairs made. Patrice hadn't paid the water bill in months. I slept on an air mattress on the living room floor with the kids, bundled in coats. But it felt different now. This wasn't hiding. This was rebuilding. Word spread fast. Family members who'd been silent suddenly had opinions. Some apologized. Some defended Patrice. "That's still your sister," they said, like blood automatically meant innocence. I learned something important during that time. Healing sometimes requires distance, even from people who share your last name.
I went back to court one more time to file a police report for the stolen items. The officer was kind, thorough. He didn't rush me. When I described the ring, my voice cracked. "It's not just jewelry," I said. "It's my mother." He nodded. "I understand," he replied. That mattered. Money was still tight. Court victories don't come with instant relief checks. I kept working nights, kept stretching meals, kept showing up. But something had shifted. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was stabilizing. I opened a small savings account with $20 and named it Future. Every deposit felt like a rebellion against the past. One afternoon, a pawn shop called. They'd received a list of stolen items. "We may have something that belongs to you," the man said. My heart raced. When I arrived, there it was, Mama's ring, sitting under fluorescent lights, tagged and priced like it was ordinary. I held it in my palm and cried right there at the counter. The clerk looked uncomfortable. I didn't care. Some tears are necessary. The police confirmed Patrice had pawned several items weeks before the ruling. Desperation has fingerprints. Charges were added to her case. I didn't feel joy about that. I felt closure. Accountability is different from revenge. That night, I cooked a real dinner for the first time in months. We ate at Mama's table, laughing, passing food, reclaiming rituals Patrice couldn't steal. I watched my kids relax into the chairs like their bodies finally believed we were safe. But as I washed dishes, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you started." I stared at the screen, heart steady, spine straight. Patrice was losing control, and people like her are most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose. I typed back one sentence, then deleted it. Some battles don't need words, because the next chapter of my life wasn't about responding to threats. It was about becoming untouchable. The threats didn't scare me the way they once would have, not because they weren't serious, but because something inside me had finally settled. Fear had ruled my life for months. Fear of losing the house, fear of failing my kids, fear of being seen as weak. Now fear felt tired, like it had done all it could do and didn't have any power left. I changed my number anyway. That wasn't fear, that was strategy. Survival teaches you the difference. With the house legally back in the estate, the next step was probate. Paperwork, more forms, more waiting. But this time I wasn't alone or confused. I understood the process now. I asked questions, I took notes, I stopped shrinking my voice to make other people comfortable. Miss Carter noticed it too. "You've changed," she said one afternoon. I smiled. I had to. Patrice was released pending further investigation. Family group chats lit up like fireworks. Some folks wanted me to drop it, said jail time was too much, said Mama wouldn't want this. I thought about that long and hard. Mama also wouldn't want her life stolen piece by piece. Protecting truth isn't cruelty, it's respect. CPS officially closed the case. The letter came in the mail, stamped and final. I held it like a diploma. One more system I survived, one more attempt to break me that didn't work. I started therapy through a low-cost community program. The first session, I cried for 45 minutes straight. The therapist didn't interrupt. When I finally stopped, she said, "You've been in fight mode a long time." I nodded. Rest felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous. The kids started sleeping through the night again. Marcus stopped wetting the bed. Aaliyah laughed louder. Trauma doesn't announce itself when it leaves. It just loosens its grip slowly, quietly. I found a better job, daytime hours, benefits. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Stability felt luxurious. I paid the overdue bills one by one, watching the red notices disappear like bad dreams fading in daylight. One Saturday morning, I found Mama's old recipe box in the pantry, cards stained with grease and love. I cooked her fried chicken that night, just like she used to, extra crispy, no shortcuts. As we ate, I told the kids stories about their grandmother that didn't involve sickness or courtrooms, just joy,
just memory. Patrice's trial date was set. I didn't know how it would end, and for once I wasn't obsessing over the outcome. Justice was moving whether I watched it or not. I had done my part. Late one night, I sat on the front porch alone, listening to the neighborhood breathe. Same street, same house, different woman. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had carried me through the fire, but I didn't need to live there. What surprised me most was the grief that came next, not just for Mama, but for the sister I thought I had. I mourned her quietly, honestly. Then I let her go. Because the life I was building didn't have room for ghosts. And just when I thought the hardest part was behind me, the phone rang again, this time from the district attorney's office, with news that would force me to face Patrice one last time, not as her sister, but as her witness. The district attorney's office felt colder than the courthouse ever had. Same fluorescent lights, same institutional smell. But this time, I wasn't fighting to survive. I was being asked to stand still and speak truth into a system that once felt impossible to trust. The DA slid a folder across the table and said, "We need you to testify." I didn't answer right away. My fingers traced the edge of the folder like it might bite me. Testifying meant reopening everything, every lie, every night in the car, every time my children asked questions I couldn't answer. But it also meant finishing what I started. I nodded. I'll do it. Preparing for trial was different this time. There were no frantic Google searches, no fear-driven desperation, just clarity. I met with prosecutors, walked through timelines, reviewed evidence I already knew by heart. Patrice's actions weren't being debated anymore. They were being documented, framed, held up to the light. Still, nights were restless. Trauma doesn't disappear just because justice shows up late. I dreamed about Mama often. Sometimes she was sick, fading. Sometimes she was strong, standing in the kitchen with her hands on her hips, watching me like she was proud. I always woke up before she spoke. The kids knew I had another court thing, but they didn't ask questions. They'd grown wiser than their years. Before I left one morning, Aaliyah hugged me tight and said, "Tell the truth, Mommy." I kissed her forehead. That's all I know how to do. The day of the trial, Patrice sat at the defense table in a wrinkled suit, hair pulled back tight, face bare. She looked smaller than I remembered, not weak, just exposed. She glanced at me once, eyes flickering with something like regret, or maybe calculation. I didn't look away. When I took the stand, my heart raced, but my voice held steady. I told them about Mama's illness, about the forged deed, about the missing money, about sleeping in the car with my children while my sister lived comfortably in a house she stole. The courtroom was silent except for my voice. No dramatics, no exaggeration, just facts layered with lived pain. The defense tried to rattle me, asked why I didn't notice the withdrawal sooner, why I didn't fight harder earlier. I answered calmly, because I trusted my sister, and because caregiving is exhausting. The judge nodded. Trust is not negligence, it's humanity. Then the prosecutor introduced the final piece of evidence, text messages Patrice thought she'd deleted, messages bragging about securing the house and making Monique disappear. I felt something release in my chest. This wasn't my word against hers anymore. This was truth with receipts. Patrice's lawyer whispered frantically to her. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. For the first time, I felt no urge to comfort her. Consequences don't need witnesses, they just arrive. When closing arguments ended, the judge announced the verdict would be delivered the following week. One more wait, one more breath held. Outside, reporters hovered, hungry for drama. I walked past them without stopping. My story wasn't for sound bites, it was for survival. That night, back at the house, I sat alone in Mama's bedroom and placed her ring on the dresser. I whispered, "I did what I could." The room felt warm, still. But just as I turned off the light, my phone buzzed, a voicemail from Patrice's number, the one I thought was disconnected. Her voice was raw, unfiltered. "If I'm going down, I'm not going alone." I stood there in the dark, phone pressed to my ear, realizing my sister still had one last move left, and whatever it was meant to hurt more than anything she'd done before. That voicemail sat in my phone like a loaded gun. If I'm going down, I'm not going alone. No explanation, no follow-up, just a threat hanging in the air, daring me to panic. Old me would have spiraled. New me took a breath, saved the message, and handed it straight to the prosecutor the next morning. Turns out, Patrice had already played her last card. She just didn't realize it yet. The DA called me in later that week. Patrice had attempted to flip the narrative, claiming I'd manipulated Mama, that I'd hidden assets, that I was the one who coerced her. It might have worked months ago when everything was chaos and I had no footing, but now her accusations collapsed under their own weight. Too many records, too many witnesses, too much documented truth. What hurt wasn't the lie itself, it was the desperation behind it. Watching someone who once shared your childhood photos and inside jokes try to burn you down just to save themselves changes how you understand family forever. The kids felt the tension again. Trauma has a memory. Marcus asked if we were in trouble again. I knelt down and looked him in the eyes. "No," I said firmly. "This time, the truth is louder than the lies." He nodded, trusting me in a way that felt sacred. The verdict day came quietly. No crowds, no reporters, just us and the weight of finality. Patrice sat still, hands folded, eyes hollow. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on multiple counts of fraud and elder financial abuse, I didn't feel joy, I felt gravity. Actions landing where they were always meant to land. Sentencing was scheduled for later, but the outcome was sealed. Patrice looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time, not as her little sister, not as someone she could control, but as a woman who survived her. After court, I drove home in silence, no music, just breathing. I pulled into the driveway and sat there longer than necessary, hands on the wheel, grounding myself in the ordinary miracle of having a place to park, a place to return to. Inside, the kids were doing homework at the table. Normal, beautiful. I cooked dinner, folded laundry, lived my life, all while knowing a chapter was closing that I never asked to write. That night, I dreamed of Mama again. This time, she smiled and said nothing. She didn't need to. A few days later, I received a letter from Patrice's attorney requesting mediation for family reconciliation. I laughed, not bitterly, but clearly. Reconciliation requires accountability, not timing. I declined. I spent the next weeks focusing on rebuilding credit, repainting walls, planting flowers in the front yard Mama always talked about but never got around to. Each small act felt like reclaiming territory, not just the house, but myself. The sentencing date approached. People asked how I felt. I told them the truth. I felt free. Free from carrying someone else's choices, free from silence, free from the lie that strength means enduring abuse quietly. The night before sentencing, I sat on the porch again, watching the lights come on one by one down the street. Same place, new peace. I realized something then. The house had never really been the point. My voice was. And tomorrow, when the judge spoke one final time, I would walk forward not as a betrayed sister, not as a homeless mother, but as a woman who stood up, told the truth, and survived the cost of it. And that ending, no matter what sentence was handed down, already belonged to me. The sentencing hearing didn't feel heavy the way everything else had. It felt quiet, settled, like the last note of a long song finally fading out. I sat on the same wooden bench, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. Patrice sat a few feet away, thinner now, shoulders slumped, eyes tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her either. I simply saw her clearly. The judge spoke about breach of trust, about elder abuse, about greed disguised as entitlement. He spoke about how family betrayal cuts deeper because it happens where love is supposed to live. Patrice's sentence wasn't dramatic. Restitution, probation, a permanent record that would follow her longer than she ever followed Mama's wishes. Accountability doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lands quietly and stays. When it was over, Patrice looked at me one last time. There were tears then, real ones. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered as deputies led her away. I didn't respond. Intent doesn't undo impact. Some lessons can't be softened. Outside the courthouse, the sun felt warm on my face. I closed my eyes and let it hit me. The weight was gone. Not the memory, not the scars, but the constant pressure to defend my truth. I had told it, I had proven it, and now I could live. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale overnight. Bills still came, grief still visited. Some mornings I still woke up expecting to be in the car, cramped and afraid. Healing isn't linear. It loops, it stumbles, it surprises you. But every day I chose forward. I refinanced the house in my name, fixed the roof, painted Mama's bedroom a soft cream instead of hospital white. I planted those flowers she always talked about, yellow roses right under the front window. The kids helped, dirt on their hands, laughter in their throats. That sound was my real inheritance. I taught Aaliyah about boundaries. I taught Marcus about honesty, not through lectures, but through living. They saw me fall, they saw me fight, they saw me stand back up without losing myself. That mattered more than any speech I could have given them. Family gatherings changed. Some people drifted away, others grew closer. I learned that peace sometimes costs you access to people who benefited from your silence. It's a price I'd pay again. On Mama's birthday, I sat alone in the living room with her photo and her Bible. I told her everything, the fear, the rage, the nights I almost gave up. I told her I understood now why she worried, why she wrote that letter, why she trusted me to carry truth even when it hurt. I promised her I'd keep living loud and honest. I'm not the woman I was when that eviction notice slid across the table. I'm stronger, softer, clearer. I know now that betrayal doesn't define you, your response does. And survival isn't just about making it through, it's about choosing who you become afterward. I reclaimed my home, yes, but more importantly, I reclaimed my voice. And nobody, not blood, not fear, not loss, gets to take that from me ever again. If you learned something new from my life story, please like this video, subscribe to join our community for more stories like mine, and comment down below where you're watching this video from. I'd truly love to know.